Hello, we're in our Bible study in Psalms. We're on Psalm 5, and I have to say, what an incredible psalm. What a beautiful psalm. What a rich and lavish psalm in its meaning and the depth that's in it. And as I've been looking at this, I've been particularly looking at the Passion Translation for Psalm 5, but there's so much in it that I may or may not complete it in one session. I'll see how we get on, and I may split it up and do it in two. But the title here on its own is just, for me, glorious. It expresses something so well. In this version here, it calls it the Song of the Clouded Dawn, and we'll see what that means as we go through. But I just thought, if ever something expresses a mixture, it's the hope and the beauty of a sunrise, and yet it speaks in the cloud of the hiddenness of what that beauty is. And we'll see that played out in the psalm. It's a parable in itself, that there are days where we don't have that clear sight of who God is, yet he's there, and it's like a new day. And yet more than that, the cloud itself, the challenges actually reveal beauty. You think of the clouds in the morning, in the morning sky, and the colours that can shine around on the cloud as the sun rises. So the beauty and the parable there, just in that title, I just think is absolutely fantastic. And to realise that sometimes we face challenging and difficult circumstances, but when we're in the middle of it and it's like it is a clouded dawn, recognise in the same way as the colours can only be viewed in the cloud, there are opportunities in the challenges that there's opportunities to worship, there's opportunities to praise, there's opportunities to put God first. That, difficult though it is to say or even imagine, those opportunities aren't there. They won't even be there in heaven because the challenges aren't there. If that makes sense. This one carries on. It says, first bit, it always has this little introduction. It says, for the pure and shining one. Now, most versions talk about for the choir director or the choir master, but again, that word is rooted in other meanings, and so here it talks about the pure and shining one. It's like this is being written as a shining out. It's been written to declare something of the goodness of God. And the second bit says, for one who receives inheritance. Again, the translation we'll be familiar with is the one who plays the flute, but that word flute or flautist is rooted in that sense of inheritance. And these psalms, they're written for us in the New Testament. We're the ones that receive that inheritance. So if that's not enough for today, we'll get into the psalm and have a look and see some of the things that are written. And you get that sense here that David, he's up in the morning, he's looking out, and he says, listen, Yahweh, to my passionate prayer. Straight away, we've got David saying, listen, hear, I'm giving my all to this prayer. And he goes, can't you hear my groaning? Don't you hear how I'm crying out? And there's, in the morning, it's like David's focus as he's in that moment that we're calling the clouded dawn. He has a cry in his heart towards God. And it's so easy, isn't it, when we've got stuff going on, that we race around in life trying to do the stuff, maybe even to alleviate the pressures and the challenges. But can we stop for a moment and allow ourselves to stop for a moment, that our hearts refreshed by the Father, that our crying out is towards him. It goes on, my King and my God, consider every word, for I am calling out to you. And he's not saying this from a place where he doesn't believe that God hears. He's here because he understands that God hears him, hears the cry of his heart. And he says, at each and every sunrise, you will hear my voice as I prepare my sacrifice of praise to you. Every morning I lay out the pieces of my life on an altar and wait for your fire to fall upon my heart. And elsewhere it talks about I'll be on the watchtower, I'll be watching out. And for us, there's a challenge here, isn't there? There's something to allow it to grab our hearts. Well, I have to say it's easier to see the sunrise as we come into winter, but having that heart of attitude, having a heart that we're willing to give a sacrifice of praise, having a heart that day by day we put the pieces of our life on the altar, talk about the ultimate sacrifice. We're the living sacrifice, and we're doing it with a hope that the fire of God will touch our hearts. The fire of God will move our hearts. The fire of God will come and there'll be an answer to the cry of our hearts. Verse 4 says, I know that you, Lord, or God, are never pleased with lawlessness. He's bringing a separation, and the evil ones will never be invited as guests to your house. And boasters collapse until unable to survive your scrutiny. For your hatred of evildoers is clear. You will make an end of all those who lie. How you hate their hypocrisy and despise all who love violence. So again, what's David doing here? He's setting his scene. Now, I think we have to look back over some of the Psalms that he's written, and we get that sense of the trouble, the turmoil, the challenge, the risk to his life and everything else he's facing. But in his heart, he has a separation. And he's saying, hey, evilness, lawlessness, those things that appear in some ways to be winning. He says, that's not the way of God. There's an end that comes to that. And I think for us, the relevance for us is that we might be facing difficult circumstances, and sometimes in those difficult circumstances it's so easy and challenging to compromise. But David, as we loop back round to what he's saying, he's getting up, he's not looking for compromise. He is looking for an end to the challenges that maybe he faces, but not compromise. So I just want you to think for a moment on those areas, and the challenges that we can face. And then he goes on and he talks about the welcome into the house of God. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop and start again as a second 10-minute. I will actually release them both on Tuesday together, so you can go from one to another. But if you prefer, then you've got your approximately 10-minute segregation. So part one ended. In a moment, part two will start.